Well, good morning, everybody. It is about 10:05. We're going to go ahead and get started, and there'll probably be some more that will join us as we get going. My name is Dave Clark. I'm with ESI Consultants, and we handle the DVE technical supportive services all over the state of Illinois. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as I go through my introductions here. Also with us today that'll be doing the presentation over consultant pre-qualifications and EPAS system at IDOT is Jenny LaSure. She's in the consultant service section, and it's, most of you probably know is very knowledgeable on the EPAS system and how it works and what you may need to know. We'll do a little bit of sharing some of my screens here, and we'll pull one more over for you. I don't know if you saw we'll go up to my other one here, in case you couldn't see that either. And just a little bit of the housekeeping things. I'll go over that. Like I say, please keep yourself muted. Use the Q&A or the chat to ask questions. I'll monitor that, and we'll go over questions and answers at the end. Keep your video off. As I mentioned, we are recording this, and we'll provide that along with other helpful information such as the presentation. And be sure you get the survey, fill that out. We would appreciate that greatly. Then I wanted to go over and find my you signed up. I just kind of wanted to touch on base on upcoming workshops we have. You can see up here, this is the website that you go to, and most, if you've signed up, you've gone to this website. When you go there, you're going to see this. And then as you scroll down, you'll see the events that are upcoming. Yesterday, they did a bidding on the IDOT website workshop. Today, we're doing the EPAS consultant pre-qualification. Tomorrow, I'll do one on an Excel spreadsheet estimating bidding that we developed several years back and show you how to use that. And then on Friday, Jenny will be back with us, and we'll do some more work on the EPAS system, doing statements of interest. And then, as you can see, if I scroll down, there's several more coming up yet this month: subcontractor agreements, job costing, contracts. We'll do some landscaping, avoiding pitfalls. There's a lot coming up. Some of these are probably more appropriate for contractors, but most of them we try to make it to where it helps the consulting side of the industry as well as the contracting side of the industry. So anyhow, I would say, please take a look at this from time to time. There might be new ones that come on. See if there's something that interests you. There's also a little button up here in the corner you can follow, and you get notifications of things that are upcoming. So take advantage of that also. With that, I will stop sharing, and I'm going to turn this then over to Jenny. Jenny LaSure is with the IDOT in the consultant services section. She works with the EPAS system a lot. She puts out the advertisements. She's involved with this heavily, especially on the consulting side, and getting the work out there so you can put in your qualifications. So today she'll talk about pre-qualification, and Jenny, I'll let you go ahead and start sharing.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. So as Dave said, I work at IDOT in the Bureau of Design and Environment. I'm the Consultant Services Unit Chief. So a few things I'm going to go over today, and some of you are probably well familiar with, but basically just a high-level overview, what the requirements are, talk about processing time on our end, and then do a quick EPAS walkthrough demo, and then open it up for questions. So with the overview, this isn't just pre-qualification, it's pre-qual and financial. Too often I have newer firms ask me, can I just get an overhead rate, or can I just get pre-qualified? It's a bundle deal. It's basically 2 for 1. We offer well over at least 55 various categories. 16 of those are actually in my office and unit, and we have about 14 different pre-qual reviewers from various bureaus. So like anything structure related, any of our structure pre-qual categories, we have people in the bridge office reviewing those specific categories. Everything is submitted electronically through EPAS, and EPAS is our engineering pre-qualification and agreement system. And the application processing time can take anywhere from 7+ months and potentially even more, which I'll get into in a little bit later. So just to give you an idea of what the process is, so as the firm, you submit what's called a SEFC, which is our online application through EPAS, and it will go to us in BDE, which is Bureau of Design and Environment, and we will do what's called an initial review. Basically, make sure you have all the requirements. If you're missing anything, insurance is up to date, et cetera. If we have anything additional, we send it back to you to resubmit. And if we are okay with everything, we'll take it to the next level, which we have a pre-qual reviewer, which that depends on the category. So if you're going for like 10+ categories or more, you could have maybe 3 or 4 different people reviewing your application at one given time. And then where a lot of people are right now is basically we're waiting for your overhead rate to get reviewed, and that is kind of typically, if you're familiar with our process or start in our process, it's kind of where our backlog is, unfortunately. So hopefully once your overhead rate gets approved, you get your approval letter, and we can go from there. So our top 5 categories that we offer, or I guess not offer, but the top 5 categories where we have the most pre-qualification. Number 1 being highways, roads, and streets, and I would have thought probably construction section would be our most popular category. But it comes in second. And then we have rehab, location drainage, and traffic studies. So that kind of gives you a good idea of the competition out there. So construction inspection is actually our top category for DBE firms, I will say that. So just to give you an idea, currently as of February 3rd, we have 365 firms that are pre-qualified. It's always in a state of flux, and it does change daily, especially after June 30th, which I'll get into later. We have about 65% non-DBE firms and 35% DBE firms that are pre-qualified with us currently. And we do publish the consultant list on the IDOT website, and I will go over that live demo for you where you can find it. But we do publish it at least every Friday, and I will say I try every Friday. Sometimes it's Monday. It depends. But usually it's at least updated every week. It is uploaded by a PDF and Excel version. And this is just a screenshot if you're on the pre-qual tab where you can find the information. And again, I'll demo it so we can do a walkthrough. So kind of getting into the nitty-gritties of the requirements. So anything you want to find about our process, it's on our website under the IDOT.illinois.gov, doing business, procurements, engineering, architectural, and professional services. And then for this particular process, it's the pre-qual tab. And I'll go over the various tabs in the demo. So the 2 main things to look for if you're first starting out is basically reviewing what our pre-qual requirements are and our EPAS instruction manual, which is basically screenshots going over the requirements and just telling you a little bit more detail about them. And so this is what the cover sheet looks like. I am trying to make updates to it because we've had a lot of changes in the past year, and I'm a little slow, but I'm hoping to have the manual updated in March. So hopefully next month, fingers crossed, I can get it published. So just to kind of talk about the requirements, like I said before, it is pre-qual and financial. So when you first log into EPAS, you have what's called the corporate profile, and I'll go through it, but you'll basically supply a main contact and a financial. These 2 individuals are very, very important because if we have questions or follow-ups, those are the 2 people we're going to go to first, because that's pretty much you giving us permission to go to those people to talk about either your financials or just anything about your SEFC in general. And of course, your fiscal year ending date, which I think 90% of the firms use the calendar year, which would be December 31st. Another thing we have is a corporate financial. And like I said, I'll go through this on the walkthrough, but you have basically 3 options to submit financial information. Number 1, which is obviously the quickest way to get through our system, would be an audit by another state or federal agency, and it has to be a cognizant audit. The second thing would be if you're a new firm within the next, like within the last 6 months, sometimes a year, depending. And I'll kind of get in a little detail about that. And then the third, which is our most popular, is, of course, you don't apply to any of the other two. So it would be all the overhead information, all the financial information, where audits is going to go through it and pick and, ask you a lot of questions. There is a lot of back and forth sometimes, and it can be very time consuming. And then indirect cost as well. So when I'm talking about a new firm, what do I mean? And sometimes this is a big question because firms will try to establish an account and they'll be like, oh, I'm new. And I'm like, well, it doesn't mean like, hey, you're new to the system. It means like you are literally newly established within the last 6 months or a year. You have no financial data. You have no work. You have no income. So that means basically, you're brand new. It doesn't mean you're new to the process. Overhead rate, I feel like when I talk to new firms, it's basically we're asking for everything but your firstborn child. It feels like we ask for your tax return, your trial balance, an AASHTO internal questionnaire, which this is required no matter what. Sometimes I have firms tell me, well, I'm not an engineering firm. And I'm like, well, engineering firm, landscape architect firm, it doesn't matter. You still have to fill out an AASHTO internal questionnaire. We need your overhead rate calculation. You'll have a certificate of final indirect cost, a compensation analysis, and a bonus data attachment. All this is also screenshots and examples in our EPAS manual, which I'll show you as well. We have a staff screen, which the staff screen is basically used for pre-qual purposes. So you're going to be adding staff and individuals that are basically going to be put towards, experience for your pre-qual in order to get you pre-qualified. You'll also have your annual fee capacity here, which I highlight here. It's defined in our Chapter 8, 2.02 of the Bureau of Design Environment Manual. This number is calculated by IDOT, and it's basically professional staff against your technical staff, and I'll kind of get into that in the demo in a little bit. And it also talks about your total firm personnel. Corporate details, we basically, ask a little bit about your ownership. This is where you actually will submit your financial disclosure, and it's kind of ridiculous nowadays, but we still have to require a disclosure of business operations in Iran. It's just a checkbox and a sign, and that's it. But you also will have to upload basically a Secretary of State certification if you have 15 or more employees, your Illinois Department of Human Rights number. If you don't have more than 15 employees, then you don't have to worry about that requirement. If you are going for a category that requires a professional engineering license or structural engineering, you will have to supply with us a copy of that license, your firm's license, from the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulations. We need a copy of your Equal Employment Opportunity Policy. Ooh, I just misspelled something there. I just caught it. DBE certification, we used to actually have you upload that certification. Now we pull directly from the Illinois UCP. So sometimes we get questions saying, hey, I'm a women-owned business, or I can't remember the other acronyms off the top of my head, but in order to be considered a DBE in EPAS for IDOT purposes, you actually have to be registered under the Illinois UCP or be certified under the UCP to be recognized as a DBE firm. If you're a veteran-owned, you'll upload your certification and then obviously your insurance. Insurance we get a little hung up on. So insurance is very important. So if you were to get approved and get a job with IDOT through the PTB process, in order to get paid, you always have to have an updated copy of your insurance on file with us. What we're hitting right now is a lot of times when you have that insurance certificate, you can't update it in the EPAS because your SEFC is under review and you can't make edits to it. So, email a copy to the DOT Consultant Service mailbox and to the IDOT project manager that you're working with so they have it on file and they can pay you. Another one of our requirements to look at when you're new with us or, starting off is our description and minimum requirements for pre-qualification. This will go through all of our categories, what the requirements are, and basically going to be your checklist when you're submitting that information in EPAS. I'm hoping to update this in March as well. I feel like I'm putting on a lot on my plate for March, but I have, big hopes. I do know we have a few new categories we're going to be adding if we can get them approved and some edits to the questionnaire. So definitely something to look for coming March. So in terms of pre-qualification, this sounds really corny, but it's, simply this, understand what you're applying for. when you are looking at the pre-qualification categories. Um, for example, something I've seen a lot is when a firm goes for roads and streets, they'll literally just put experience for just, designing a bike path, an ADA sidewalk, a parking lot. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the designing of a road or street. So make sure when you are going for those categories of work, you're looking at our requirements that we have out there because, you don't want to be in shock when you get denied for something because a typical denial would be, no roadway design experience. Because if all you're going to supply to us is bike paths, ADA sidewalk, or parking lots, that's not enough to get pre-qualified with us. So kind of go into processing. So I'm going to bring up the flow chart again. So it takes time. I'm not going to lie. If you have done business with us for years and you're familiar with our process, you know it can take up to 7+ months to get approved. It is unfortunate, and the worst part about it is our internal audits is severely understaffed, and it's causing a huge delay with that approval letter because the overhead review is what takes the longest time. So just to give you an idea of about a time frame, right? So when you submit your CEFC, it comes to my unit. And I don't feel like I'm having a sob story here, but I feel like it. But I did lose my CEFC reviewer, so I've been doing the initial reviews, and I will say it will take up to maybe a week or two in order just to get that initial review done. If there's anything missing or outdated, such as insurance, we'll send it back for additional information, and you have 2 weeks to turn that around and resubmit to us to supply the corrected information. I'm not going to lie, sometimes the initial review can take longer when June hits. So June is when we get a slew of applications because at least 90% of our firms have a due date in June. So it could take probably weeks just for the initial review to happen in June, just to let you know. So when we're looking at prequal, how long can it take for someone to review your prequal? Well, it depends on the category. It could be a day or it could be a month. I will tell you the materials categories and the geo categories, they will take up to at least a month because it also depends on the requirements. I know the materials has a lot more requirements in depth, certifications with AASHTO. Our geo categories, they're also very time consuming, but it also depends on the availability of our pre-qual reviewer because it's literally on the shoulders of one person for some of those categories. And like I said before, financial would be the last step, which usually is where the hang up is because that's where most of our applications are. So just to kind of talk about the CEFC statuses, we have various different statuses. So in progress means, and again, I'll show you this on our screen. In progress means, the firm has not submitted it. You're currently working on it. Once you submit it, it will go into submitted status. And if I don't check it out yet, it will stay in submitted. Initial review means that the Bureau Design Environment has checked it out and is looking through it. Additional information, like we talked about, means we send it back and we're waiting, waiting for you to resubmit it with the additional requested information. You get about 2 weeks to resupply that information. Initial review approved means the pre-qual reviewer now can look at your pre-qual but hasn't checked out your CEFC yet. Ranking process means that your pre-qual reviewer is now reviewing the pre-qual, and a majority of people are in what's called ranking complete status, which is you're waiting on the financial review. And this is probably the most common question I get. And after a while, it's kind of the most frustrating question is when firms will email me or even call me and be like, hey, what's the status of my CEFC? Well, first thing I do is I log into EPAS and I look, and 98% of the time it's in ranking complete. So, basically what I'm saying is when you log into EPAS and you see it in ranking complete, it means we're waiting on your overhead rate to get approved or reviewed and approved. And it depends on the firm. It could take, another month. It could take another 3 months. I don't ever have a definite time frame. Prime example, I had a firm, ask me a few weeks ago, and I hate doing this, and they're like, hey, do you have a time frame? And I'm like, oh, it looks like you're number 15 on the list. Well, that number can mean 2 weeks, next day. It can mean 5 months later. I don't know. It just depends on the firm's review and how responsive they are, or, where it's at in the audits. And, a few weeks later, they email me and they're like, I didn't get it. And I'm like, well, this is why I don't like telling you a time frame, because I don't know. And even if you contact audits and ask them, you're still, you're just not going to get a definite answer because they don't know either, because it depends on your firm's overhead and financial information. And then obviously approved means it's completed, and you can generate what everyone's looking for is that approval letter and to get on the pre-qual list. What I have highlighted in yellow from submitted to ranking complete means anytime your CEFC is in any of these statuses, minus the additional information, I should remove the yellow on that, it means you can't edit. So if it's in ranking complete, you can't reattach your insurance certificate, you can't start your next CEFC to get your financial information in there. I will say that all these statuses are defined in 6.1 of our EPAS manual. So just to give you an idea of where we're at today with processing times, because that is, again, like I said, one of the biggest questions I get. The financial review is where our backlog hits, and I'm not trying to pick on audits or anything like that. And like I said, they're severely understaffed, which is definitely this year causing way more of a delay than it normally does. So as of today, we have 300 firms, or at least 300 applications, and that includes also the amended CEFCs, just waiting to be approved. 280 of those are still waiting for overhead rate to get approved. And of those, 85% of those are the ones that submitted back in the summer. So that's definitely way over the 7-month mark, right? So that's just giving you an idea of how long this process takes just to get approved. If you are a brand new firm and have never done business with us, we do try to get you in sooner so that way you can get on the pre-qual list and at least get an opportunity to go out there and get work instead of waiting a year for your approval letter. So that is something we work with on brand new firms. So I do want to go over the approval letter a little bit because this does cause a lot of questions and confusion. So this is an example of one that I ran today when I logged in as another firm. The date, so highlighted up here. So when it says February 8th of 2023, this is the date that you ran the PDF. You clicked the approval letter button. I get a lot of pushback from this because a lot of firms are like, well, wait a minute, this isn't the date that my CEFC was actually approved. Correct. Let's say hypothetically you got approved today and you run it, then yeah, that date is correct because it was as of February 8th, your firm was marked approved. The reason that EPAS does, the quote unquote newest date is because in the past we've had firms come to us and be like, hey, can you give me an updated letter with, today's date? It's too old. So hence, whenever you click the button, it gives you the updated date. It's because a lot of firms in the past, they needed basically a letter with today's date, a date that wasn't processed a year ago. So that can cause some kind of confusion. So the next thing here I have highlighted is the fiscal year ending date. So for this firm, we run typically about a year or so behind. And this firm is still waiting on their 2021 data to be approved so they can submit their 2022 data. So it's very misleading, right? Because now we're in February of 2023, and this was their, year-ending data of 2020. So it is very confusing when you look at it. And if you're going with another agency who uses our letter, which a lot of them do, it could raise some flags or raise some questions. But you're still active. As long as you're on the pre-qual list that we post on the website, you're active, you're approved, and you can do business because you can generate this letter. The next thing that I highlighted is the annual fee capacity. So we will tell you what your firm's total annual transportation fee capacity is. And like I said, it is an estimate. Basically what we do is we take how many professional staff you have compared to how many technical staff you have. I honestly hate this number because it hinders a lot of smaller firms, but it doesn't mean you can't do the work or can't do work with us. Really what we use it for is if you were to go for a job on the PTB or the Professional Transportation Bulletin, we're going to be using this number to put it against what your current work is compared to what your firm can generate and see if you have the capacity to take on more work. And that's really what it is an estimate. The fourth thing I have highlighted here is we will include your overhead rate, and if you have multiple rates, it will be displayed here as well. The last paragraph is one we get a lot of questions about because a lot of firms freak out when they see this, right? Your firm is pre-qualified until December 31st of 2021. Woo, well, that was a year ago, right? So a lot of firms are like, whoa, what happened? It says I'm not pre-qualified now. Well, it says you'll be given an additional 6 months from this date to submit a SEPSI, which means as long as you submit a SEPSI by June 30th, which is why 90% of our firms submit, around that time or are able to submit by that time, as long as they do and they're still on our list on the website, you're good and you're golden because you're still pre-qualified. And I've really thrown the idea of possibly rephrasing this paragraph, basically stating that, as long as, your firm submits by, June 30th or whatever that date is, and you're on our website, you're still active and pre-qualified. The second page that the letter generates is basically a list of all the pre-qualification categories that your firm applied for. So if it shows an A, it means your firm was denied. If it shows an X, it means your firm is pre-qualified. With the A, a lot of people are like, well, why did I get denied? It's your responsibility to log into EPAS and go in and check and see the comments that the pre-qual reviewer left behind for you as to why you were denied in that specific category of work. So now I am going to switch my screens, and I hope everyone can now see my browser. So I'm logged in as my test firm, and I use this for testing and pre-qualification or presentation reasons. So when you log in as your firm, you'll have a few options over here, and this will be your main screen. So you'll see your SEPSI applications and your SOI applications. So your SEPSI applications is pretty much what we're going to focus on more today. So I started a new SEPSI today. And a new SEPSI is everything. It's the kit and caboodle, right? It's your financial and your pre-qual that will be reviewed. There are 3 different types of SEPSIs. As you can see here, there's 3 different types. A new SEPSI is if you're a brand new firm with us, you will do a new SEPSI, and it's your financial and your pre-qual. If you're in the system, your pre-qual is reviewed only every 3 years, but your financial is required every year no matter what. And an amended SEPSI means you can make changes to a SEPSI that was previously approved, which we can get into that later. So if I click on the SEPSI ID, like I was talking about in the presentation slides, we have the corporate profile where I'll have my fiscal year ending date, and I'll let them know how many years I've been in service with transportation, the county, if you're out of state, you can actually put out of state. And here, like I said, your main office and financial are required. And these are the 2 people that we'll be contacting if we have questions about your SEPSI. Corporate financial, when you click on that, like we talked about, it is a lot of information. So if you are one of our, obviously, majority here, question 3, are you attaching overhead rate data? When you click yes, you're going to get options to upload all of those requirements, give us your total overhead rate, your in-house direct cost, and then we have a few lingering questions down here for your firm. The staffing screen, you can hear I've been kind of playing around adding information, but this is where you're going to add staff that's going to go towards your pre-qual. So it's been a while I've been in here, so obviously I didn't list anything for Susan. I added John under roads and streets. So this is where you can kind of see where you're using people in the SEPSI application and stuff like that. The annual fee capacity, this is grayed out because this is something that IDOT is going to supply for you. And then total firm personnel, this actually gets auto-generated based on the staff that you're adding up here. But if you have other personnel such as clerical or non, pre-qual staff, you can add them here. Or if they're out-of-state individuals, click Save. So when you go to corporate details, this is a lot of information as well. It's going to ask you a few questions about your firm. Are you incorporated? When were you incorporated? What state are you incorporated in? Do you have ownership by a parent company? Do you have subsidiaries? And the big thing here is your financial disclosure. So if you ever get a job with IDOT as a prime, This is something that's very important because in order for your agreement to get processed, we have to supply your disclosures to our procurement office, which they will review and make sure there's no conflicts of interest. This is also the area where you'll supply the Secretary of State, your IDHR number if you have one, a copy of your licenses, your EEO. If I'm a DBE, it will pull from the Illinois UCP, which I am not, from my ABC Test Corp. And the big kahuna here, obviously, is pre-qualification. So if you want to add a pre-qualification category, let me just pick one. Let's do public involvement. You click Add Category. It'll be added to this chart here, but in order to get to the actual questionnaire, you actually have to go over here to the subcategory, which is Special Services. So if I click Special Services, Public Involvement will show up. And this is where I'm going to add staff from the staffing screen, and I'm going to actually edit their staffing experience. And this is the information that the pre-qual reviewers are actually going to see. So some of the questionnaires are canned, and they're kind of similar for every category, and others, like I know hazardous waste, for example, they are very, very complicated or, a little bit more detailed than some of the other categories. So let's look at hazardous waste, for example. They have a lot more information or a little bit different of a questionnaire than some of the other categories. And like I said, I'm hoping to update this information in March, maybe, if I can get to it. Summary and submit screen. This screen will let you know what all you are missing. So you actually have to supply all this information that is highlighted here in order to check the box and submit your CEFC application. So I know that was really, really fast, but that is literally the CEFC application in a very quick, high-level nutshell. So a few things I do want to go over with. We did talk about the IDOT website. So when you go to the IDOT website, doing business, procurements, engineering, architectural, and professional services, you can click here, or you can click the image, which is what I do half the time. You have a number of different tabs that you can look at. Prequal is obviously step number one, because this is where you are going to go to get the description of mineral requirements. My email address is here, and also the EPAS instruction manual, and a link to the disclosure and business and operations in Iran forms that need to get uploaded. So this is where you're going to look for the description of minimum requirements. And in here is where you're actually going to find all of the requirements for the categories. So if I was looking at survey, this is going to tell you what's required. One big thing we highlight, construction staking is not relevant. The minimum personnel requirements are 1 Illinois professional land surveyor and support staff. Support staff is a big thing, and that is actually something to be very, very in tuned with, because some firms who apply get denied because they don't list support staff. And I would say support staff is probably for pretty much all 55 categories. Make sure you have at least a support staff. And like I talked about, we have our manual out there, and you have the CEFC entry, which goes through all the screenshots we talked about today in a little bit more detail and just more detailed instructions. So going back to the IDOT website, we did talk about the list of pre-qualified consultants. So we have the pre-qual consultants and the DBE, and then I'll show you the Excel. So if I list, where'd it go? There it is. So the list of pre-qualified firms, it literally is that. It is in alphabetical order. It tells you the firm name, if they're DBE, who the main contact is, the address, a phone. And I really don't know why we have fax number anymore, because nobody faxes anything. If you were to ask me to fax something, I wouldn't know what to do. What categories of work they are pre-qualified in. After talking to industry, it's understandable that this is very, very hard to navigate, to find partners. So we do have, let me get this slided over, an Excel version of it out there to maybe hopefully make it a little bit easier to find firms that are pre-qualified in categories. So if I was a firm and I was looking for a partner or a sub that could do traffic studies, if I click traffic studies, a list of firms, which is 144 firms, 39% of our total pre-qualified firms listed here that can provide those services. you can take it down one more layer and look straight for DBE firms only, which we have 35 in traffic studies. If you want to clear your filters, you can clear the little icon here or go up to data and just click clear. Or you can go here into the drop down and, unselect, and let's say construction inspection. Like I said earlier, construction inspection is number 2 most populous, but it does have the most DBE firms pre-qualified. So you can also clear your filters up here as well. Or if you just want to look for a specific firm, I'm going to pick on Dave because I know he's with ESI. I can click ESI. Doesn't want to. And I can just look at their profile in general and see what categories of work they have to offer. So that is something that we have out there to help you build your teams. So a few of the other tabs to look out for is the bulletin tab. So once you're pre-qualified and approved, you can actually go for advertisements that we post out there, which is why I feel bad we had to reschedule because I was busy with the bulletin last week. And it is out there now, and you have about 3 weeks to do statements of interest to get those in EPAS. Statements of interest, which we'll talk about Friday, are submitted electronically through EPAS, but this is where you can find the bulletin and any past archived bulletins, and also a schedule for future bulletins as well. This kind of talks about things to keep in mind when doing a SOI. Now, if you were to get selected on a project, it will tell you basically what your requirements are for, getting a prime agreement initiated. Our standard agreement provisions for consultant services, a copy of that is located here. And then something really big that I hope people actually do subscribe to is our subscription service. So we do use this a lot of times. So when we publish the bulletin, I will post it out there for everybody to see. The press release, this is where I will also, let people know a copy of it is available. If we have any changes, anything of upcoming web training, we post it all out here. So it's very important to subscribe to this mail list. Also, we have a YouTube playlist, which goes over some of the past videos we have done, and I probably need to get a little bit better of recording and posting out there, but there is a link to that as well. And down here, it used to actually be up here for quick links because now I guess it's not so quick when you have to scroll down, right? You have consultant resources, a link to EPAS, a link to HPPR, a link to vendor docs, which we're not even going to tackle, but at least here you can click to EPAS if you need to. And consultant resources, what that is going, a link to the BDE manual and some of the other various manuals that you might be using, approved labs, special provisions, a little bit of everything, I guess you should say. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I know Dave has some questions out there.
Yeah, I put a few questions out there for you as you were talking. And I guess you might be able to see them, but, for new firms, it was always my understanding that you would get like a temporary overhead rate assigned that you can use while you're waiting for that review. Is that the case? And if so, what would that number be? Or does that just depend on each firm that is applying?
So if you're a brand new firm, never done business with us, very new, and established, don't have any financial information tied to your company, then we would do what's called issue an overhead rate, and it would be a blanket 120 rate.
Okay. And then I'll just remind everybody that's out there, any questions you have, now's the time to, put them in the chat. We'll go through them one by one and try to get all the answers that we can for you. One other thing come to mind when you were talking about the pre-qual list, what are some of the things that could get you kicked off that list for whatever reason?
So there's a few different scenarios. So the first things first is if you don't submit your SEFC on time. So what do I mean by that? So I'm going to share my screen again real quick. Screen one. Go back to the IDOT website. And the EPAS manual. So when to submit. So no matter what, you have to submit a CEFC every year. It just depends on your firm name, number one, because down here, for example, any firm submitting in 2023, so if your firm starts between the letters of F and N, you have to do what's called a new CEFC. And that is basically your pre-qual and your financials. Anyone else, it's a renewal, which a renewal, all that is your corporate financial information. So if you do not submit a CEFC, in June or whatever, 6 months after your fiscal year ending date, the system will automatically mark you as not approved, and that will get you kicked off the pre-qual list. Another thing to get you kicked off the pre-qual list for a particular category would be maybe not updating your experiences. So we only accept experiences within the last 10 years. So let's say you submitted a new CEFC and you didn't update your roads and streets pre-qual category, and you have a lot of older experiences out there, you didn't add anything new, that could get you denied in roads and streets. And then that would get you kicked off that particular category. Oh, one moment. Sorry. So that would get you kicked off if you're not updating your pre-qualification questionnaires. A third thing that has happened to firms, when you are going through your overhead rate review, if you become what we call non-responsive, and not just even in that, but even if we ask you for additional information in your CEFC, and you become what's called non-responsive, we usually give you a week to respond. But if you don't respond to us and we're emailing you and asking you questions, we will actually mark you not approved for basically being non-responsive.
Okay, another question just coming to my mind too, as you're talking about that, for DBEs in particular, if they don't send in their no change affidavit every year like they're supposed to, does that then get them removed from a DBE, but let them still remain as a pre-qualified consultant?
Yes. So like if they did not update what they needed in Illinois UCP, I probably wouldn't know that, except I would see that their DBE status would change, because if they got revoked for some reason in the Illinois UCP, that change would be reflected in EPAS, basically showing them as a non-DBE firm.
So that's something you manually have to check and uncheck, or is that something that automatically happens?
So like the DBE box in EPAS, or because what will happen is, like, I do get emails, because we've had this with a few firms when their DBE status changes. If it changes in the Illinois UCP and your EPAS CEFC is currently under review, that status will not change automatically. The only time I will see it change is if you submit a new CEFC or an amended CEFC. So I do have emails daily that will tell me if, there's discrepancies between UCP and EPAS. So what's happened is, like, I've had firms where they gained a DBE status that they didn't have when they submitted their EPAS CEFC. So then we'll work with them to try and make sure we get that figured out and straightened out. Same thing as if, they were dropped from the Illinois UCP, but they're still active in EPAS as a DBE. We'll get that flagged just so we can keep that on our radar.
Just another reminder, anybody out there that has any questions, put them in the chat and we'll go through them one by one. But I did have another one out there, Jenny. I know there's multiple, like for structures, and there's other categories like that too. But like for structures, there's several categories within structures, and each one of them might have some different requirements in terms of what you would need to provide in terms of information to be successful in getting that category. Do you have any pointers on the type of information that you should be sure to put in your pre-qualification when you're applying for it to make that review maybe go easier and potentially go quicker?
It really kind of depends about which category, unfortunately. I will say for like some of the ones that are in my unit, like roads and streets, freeways, any of the location design studies surveying, paragraphs are never a good idea in my mind because as a pre-qual reviewer, when you're looking at those questionnaires, everything starts to blur together when you have paragraphs and you don't keep it to the point. Like, you still need to provide enough detail about what the firm actually did or what you did at the firm and what experience ties back to, like, let's say roads and streets. But when you give a paragraph or like 3-paragraph narrative about the project itself, but you didn't tell me what you did, that doesn't help the reviewer at all. Too often I've had where firms actually tell me way more about the project itself versus what they actually did. And they've gotten denied on that, particular reason because you read 3 paragraphs of what that particular project is, and you're like, that's great. But what did you do? So if you don't tell me what you did, you can't get pre-qualified because you're just telling me about the project you worked on, but I don't know what work you did on that specific project. That is something, you bring up a really good question because that is something we're looking at, is actually looking at the questionnaires in the future and how to update them, make them a little bit more user-friendly because it is hard to fill out. It's cumbersome, I'm not going to lie. And we do see that as a glaring issue in EPAS that we really need to kind of get cleaned up to make it a little bit easier for you guys to print out what you submit, how to fill it out, and not make it so clunky because we think that some of the reasons like older projects aren't, deleted is because it's hard to find it once you enter that information. So we are looking at updating the SEPSI side in the questionnaire in the near future, maybe like in the next 2 years. To just make it a little bit better for everybody, right? For you to input the information. And so it's cleaner for us to be able to review it on the other end.
And I think, the question comes to my mind, or comment, I guess. I think you mentioned earlier in the presentation that you had that little table there that you can't do any editing. So like once you submitted something, say we submit our SV at the end of June, then we can't go in and do any other edits until that gets approved. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep, that is correct.
So if the overhead rate is still being reviewed and hasn't been approved, and we turned it in June, and here we are, it's February, it's still not out there. That whole time we can't go in and request another category or anything like that. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's what I thought. I'm looking, I'm not seeing any other questions. Anybody's got any, please put them in there, and here's a good chance to ask those, especially the ones that are working in the EPAS system a lot. I see Tina's on there. I don't know if Tina's got any question. I know she does it quite a bit. But if I'm not seeing other questions, Jenny, I think probably, unless you got some other comments that you want to make at this point, then we can maybe close this out for the day and we can get ready for Friday.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody, for taking the time.
Thanks.
Be sure to fill out the evaluation, and we will be getting information out to you later when we get the recording in and get it turned in with the presentation. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you on Friday.
Thank you all.